founder, CEO, Wild Foods Co. Another quick 2 to 3 minute video on one big idea, one big topic. And today's is one of my favorites. It's what I base a lot of my life around. It is basically the human body and the story of the human body and where we came from, how we lived, and how that's changed since the advent of agriculture and humans moving into cities. So my two props are two of the must-reads for evolutionary biology. Sapiens, which you may or may not have heard of, is a very popular book. And then least popular, or I would say less popular, but still a very good read, is Daniel Lieberman, The Story of the Human Body. So let's look at these without my face in there. Okay. Now let's go over real quick each book. Let's just read the cover. Interesting and provocative. It gives you the sense of perspective on how briefly we've been on this earth. That's a quote by Barack Obama. This is the thrilling account of our evolutionary history, from significant apes to rulers of the world. Jaw-dropping from the first word to the last. It may be the best book I've ever read. Chris Evans. Now, Story of the Human Body. A little bit longer. Fascinating. A readable introduction to the whole field and great on the making of our physicality. That's from Nature magazine. Sweeping. Convincingly makes the case for a wholesale rethinking of how we live our modern lives. That's a good quote, and that's very true. The more you learn about evolutionary biology, the more you realize how out of sync we are as modern humans with the world we live in today, and all this technology and these buildings. And I mean, this should be green. I should be around green. There should be animals, and I should be hearing sounds. But instead, I'm in this box. I'm in this literal, artificial, man-made box. At least I can control the heat because it's pretty cool outside. Lieberman's found a tale inside our skin that's riveting, enlightening, and more than a little frightening. And that is by Christopher McDougall, author of Born to Run. Okay, so both these are really good. I'd probably say start with Sapiens, to be honest, because it's a little bit easier to read. It's more enjoyable. It covers a lot more things. This is like kind of nitty-gritty paleontology and evolutionary biology, and kind of gets really deep into some of the concepts of before humans and how we used to climb the trees and eat fruit primarily, and how we evolved out of that or whatever. Sapiens is a good sweeping account of, I think he even gets into the advent of agriculture and how that changed everything. And so this is a really good primer to kind of go back to the beginning. And when I say beginning, I really mean the beginning of civilization, because this beginning of civilization resulted in homo sapiens that were city dwellers instead of nomadic wild people, which is what our ancestors before agriculture all were, and what we're designed to do as a human. The really big concept here, and what you can actually take in your everyday life and put to good use, is the idea that humans are mismatched to our current environment. So imagine you were going to camping and you kind of let's say you got lost in the woods and you had nothing, no tools, nothing. Maybe it was you and a couple other people. So you had a small tribe of people and you had to work together to survive. You had to find food, you had to find shelter, you had to find water, and you had to ideally try to find your way back to civilization. Now, you would do everything you could to survive, right? Because your human urge to survive is built into you, me, and every other human alive and that's ever been, that always will be. We have a desire to procreate, and we have a desire to live as long as we can and find as many mates as we can to increase the chances that we procreate. These are the fundamental biological imperatives of the human species, okay? And when you're thrown in the wild, there are certain things that you would do to have to survive. You'd have to walk a lot and move a lot. You could not stay in one spot. You'd always be searching for food, for shelter, for tools, for an animal you could scavenge, because calories in the wild were not ready. They were not available. You had to go out and get them. And they weren't always easy to find either. You might have to walk a few miles before you'd find a few berries, right? And if you take that one example of food ubiquity today versus how it was then, you can see how mismatched our environment really is, because now we can eat food whenever we want. It's around us everywhere. We literally, the most we have to do to get food is call up the pizza place and have it delivered to our doorstep, and then walk to our table and eat it. Compare that to how we would have had to go in the wild to find food. We might have to hunt, which sometimes you weren't successful. You would have to go forage, right? Dig up tubers, nuts and seeds, do all these things, process them down, make them edible, and then share them with the people around you. So you'd have to expend energy to find calories, right? And then you wouldn't typically find as many calories as you would in the modern world, right? So back then, if you had a big kill, you'd share with the whole tribe. You wouldn't necessarily gorge and get your fill. You'd have to make sure that everyone got their fill as well, which is group survival, which is a topic for another day. And so your calories in aggregate would be much less than what we eat today. Secondly, pertaining to food, you wouldn't eat all the time. You would go maybe sometime days without food, which is why intermittent fasting is so beneficial for the human animal, because it mimics how our ancestors survived in the wild. They lived in an environment where food wasn't available from grocery stores. There was no modern food preservation, right? So they had to go long periods of time without food. And sometimes if they had a successful kill, they would all eat and you would have abundant calories, and then you would eat those until there was nothing left and you would do the thing again. And maybe you would sustain yourself on some berries and twigs and leaves in the meantime, but not to the extent that we have today. You wouldn't have big plates of spinach available, right? Because just the act of chewing would expend calories to even digest that. So there's a lot of arguments against, like, whether humans would have eaten that many plants or not. I mean, I think we would have eaten a lot of plants, but I don't think it would have been as ubiquitous as we did today, and it would be more varied. We wouldn't have just like eaten spinach every day or iceberg lettuce every day, right? It would have been all kinds of different herbs and berries and twigs and different greens and tubers and nuts and seeds. It would have been a very wide mix of nutrients from the different foods you'd be eating. And so, again, topic for another day, but when you understand evolutionary biology and you can picture how humans would have lived in the wild and how you'd have to survive if you were stranded in the wild today and what you'd have to do, well, you get a pretty good picture of the things that humans are designed to do. And so walking is very good for humans, right? Fasting is very good for humans. Eating only food available in nature is very good for humans, which is why we base our entire wild mission and philosophy on eating real food as close to nature as possible. That's how we source our ingredients. So we try to find the best supplements and foods as close to nature as possible and offer those to our customers. In my life, that's what I eat. I try to eat food that's as close to nature as possible because my genes are designed to live that way. And what you find is when people eat lower carb, because there aren't a lot of carbs in nature, there just isn't, right? When people eat real food, like whether that's wild caught fish or that's wild game or grass-fed beef, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, you get better results than processed refined grains and sugars and all these other foods cooked by corporations in a neat little branded package. This video is supposed to be a short video, but I can talk about this topic all the time. Maybe it'll be a video series. But the one thing I want you to start thinking about is I want you to start thinking about how humans lived in nature for hundreds of thousands of years before agriculture came around. And when agriculture came around, humans got shorter, they got more sickly, more modern disease, there was plague, there was all these things that happened as a result of agriculture compacting people into cities. And then you have things like the invention of personal property and marriage and money and all these things that are inventions of mankind, right? These are not natural things you find in nature. These are inventions of man when he and she moved into cities, and all, the rest is history basically. And so what we want to do, we want to try to find the things in our daily life that we can mimic our ancestors so that we can get positive adaptation of our genes. That's why fasting, eating real food, walking, exercise, sprinting sometimes. We would have sprinted away from or to a predator if we were hunting. Long distance running is good. We're supposed to be the best animals for long distance running, and there's a lot of evidence that shows that humans used to have what's called endurance hunting, where we would literally track down prey for so long until they eventually collapsed from exhaustion. And that's one way we would hunt big game that maybe we couldn't have taken head on with a spear or whatever. We would basically just run them to their death, right? Or run them over a cliff, of course. So I hope this video was useful. If you have any questions or comments or anything, add it below. What are some ideas that you have on this topic? What are some questions you have on this topic? What are some things that you've seen in your life that might apply to this topic? Share it below, guys. Intermingling ideas is how this type of stuff is going to get more exposure, and it's going to help more people, because the modern human in the modern environment is devolving. It is not surviving. When we have a 60% obesity rate and an even higher rate of being overweight, we have a real problem in this country. The number one killer is heart disease and then cancer and things like that. We have some major problems on our hands, and I'm here to try to help save as many people as I can from that fate. That's why we do what we do at Wild Foods. And so if I can help you, and then you can help yourself, and you can help someone else, that's how we're gonna change the world, okay? So help me, help yourself, and then let's change the world one person at a time, one healthy human animal at a time.